Welcome to the Alaska TTAPS webinar series. Today, David Garcia from the Office of Tribal Transportation in the U.S. Department of Transportation will be discussing the FHWA Tribal Transportation Program online reporting tool. It's a new tool that's being rolled out, and I will hand it over to David to tell you about it.
Thank you, Victoria. As she said, my name is David Garcia, and I'm with the Office of Tribal Transportation, OTT, and Federal Highway Administration. Thank you for letting me talk to you guys about this. So just to give you a little background, you used to report, and there was a program called max.gov, and that's actually, I don't know if people knew, that's where they were going to and reporting the information on the financial report, it used to be called design report, and the non-construction report. That contract with Federal Highway Administration has gone away. So we brought the system internally, and one of the benefits about bringing it internally is that it'll allow us to develop it a little further, to make some changes, some modifications. And one of the big things that we're really trying to target with this change is to make it more user-friendly for the tribes that have to report every year, and also for Federal Highway, so that we can assess the information coming in quickly and use it for what we need to according to regulations. So you might hear in the future, I put on the screen port, but you might hear in the future it be called annual reporting tool. Is where we're going to now, because just to differentiate between what was done with max.gov and what we're doing now. So what I'm going to do is just go over real quickly sort of the background that's happening on the back end, and talk to you about changes you're going to see. And I'm talking about, when I say changes, I'm saying changes overall. And I'm also talking about changes directly to the tribes, what you'll see from your perspective. And then finally, I know I have documents released date here. It's already been released. Whether you're going through Federal Highway or whether you're going through BIA, both entities should have disseminated this information already out. And we're continuing to evolve it to make it better, like I said, to make it even stronger and easier for people to use. So to go over the overall changes, first of all, I want to talk about the data collection application. So one of the big things, and I really beg you, because when I came to to the Office of Tribal Transportation, OTT, this was back in October of 2022. One of the things I noticed really quickly is that there was a lot of variations of the data coming in. So what we did is, whether you're going through Federal Highway point of contact or BIA point of contact, we made sure that they had PDFs of the questions. And the reason I say PDFs is because this way, from what I learned also, is that some tribes have to go to 3, maybe 4 locations to get the information to report on the annual reporting tool now. And even when it was port, you had to do the same thing probably. So we're including some of this so that you can print out this PDF, and you have all the questions there. You can go to who you need to and just jot the information down. And then once you get to the system part, it'll be really quickly. So the reason I bring that up here as part of the data collection application is because that way you only have to input once. You don't have to input, then we say, no, this is wrong, or this needs to be modified, or whatever. And then we have to input again. So we're really trying to streamline that data collection process. So that's one of the first things I wanted to talk about. The second one is the data storage application. And so the storage of the data, it's now internal within Federal Highway Administration. And so we're really working to structure the data correctly so that it can be analyzed on the back end, provide reports over time. And when I say over time, even possibly get reports back to you, right? Beyond just saying, yes, thank you for filling this out. This is your form. Here's an example of what you submitted. We will get that out this year, but in time, hopefully, even be able to give you more than just that, maybe give you some insights and so forth. Another thing is that you're going to see in change is you're not going to receive an email or anything stating that here's a keychain, click on this keychain, and then, submit your information. The email you should have gotten already has a link. And the link is, you can use it to go directly into the form and then start filling out the information. And then finally, one of the changes after submitting the form, each form is you'll get an immediate thank you on that screen for submitting. And then in time, hopefully we'll be able to, like I said, automate the process. So once you submit, you get an email right back that says, here's your form and this is what you submitted. That way you have your own copy. At this point, we're going to send them later. But like I said, in time, hopefully we can get that completed and get that to you a little quicker and a little more efficient. So this next screen, talking about the overall changes, I wanted to show this screen because the process really did not change. The process is pretty much identical. So the column on the left that says max.gov process flow, and I apologize if you have a small screen. I know it gets pretty small and pretty hard to read. But I wanted to put this full list because the column on the left shows what was being used previously through port. And the column on the right shows what we're using now. So the process is pretty much identical. If you go down the line, everything's about the same. We're still requesting the 3 reports. According to section 117A of the FAST Act, we still need the requirement for everybody to report on the financial and non-construction reports. If you didn't have a project that was funded and you did not use funds on your project in 2023, then you don't have to submit anything for the project reports. And I'll explain more about the questions here in a bit also, so please just hang with me on that. But as you go down the line, you see pretty much everything's the same. One big item that I'll mention right now that you'll see a big difference, and I'll mention it again when we talk specifically about the tribes, is that one of the concerns I heard vetted through FHWA was that in max.gov, you could go into the report, start filling it out, and if you didn't get it completed in 20 minutes, it kicked you out and you had to restart all over again. So basically what we did, bringing the system internally, is we took that completely out. So you no longer have 20 minutes, you have a day to finish it. If you go beyond the day, it's going to kick you out and then you'll have to start again. So if you start it, try to finish it in that day. And that's another reason why we provided those PDFs with the questions, so you can get all that information. If you have all that information written down on your PDFs, it should take you about 5-10 minutes to complete. It should be really quickly. And that's the only change you're going to see from previously to the current version. So now I'm going to talk real quickly about the changes for the tribes. So one big change, the submittal process, is in the past, you got what was called a keychain. So it was a type of password management system that would identify the user, give you, some information, and then, you would go from there and then fill out the rest of the report after that. Now we're just using a link. We're using a link because we can identify you, who's submitting, when they're submitting it, and so forth. We're getting information on the back end of that, so we know who we have to go back to if anything happens or if we have any questions. But it's just a straightforward link, just like you got the link for this meeting. It's very similar to that. You click it, it opens up the report, and you start filling out. The other change that tribes are going to see is, in the past, we would ask you to submit documents, or we call them attachments, right, to the report that you were submitting. We're no longer asking for those attachments. Your point of contact, whether it's FHWA or BIA, if we need anything, they'll go directly to you and request those attachments that they need at that point. But on the report itself, you will not add any attachments. It'll just be just the questions. So we were trying to make it easier for you. If you like the changes and everything, please let your point of contacts know, and then they'll work through myself, and Blaine also here in OTT is also working with me on this. So we'll get that information. If you have comments about this, please send those in as you're filling these forms out. because that way we can, like I said, it's now in-house. We can modify it. We can make tweaks. We can improve it for the years going forward. Now, understand we may not put in everything immediately, right? We're trying to build this slowly so that nobody has a huge change immediately. So the change is just small increments, and we keep improving it and making it better from one year to the next. So that's what you can expect from a tribe perspective to see moving forward in this iteration and moving forward. So I'll just go through this real quickly because obviously the documents should have already been sent out to you. If you didn't receive them, if you work usually through your BIA point of contact, go through them. If you work through an FHWA point of contact, we call them tribal coordinators. If you work through them, contact them. They'll get you the information out quickly so that you can have time to fill it out. And just as a reminder, these annual reports are due by the end of the calendar year. So by December 31st, 2023. And the plug I'm going to put in right now is please don't wait till the end, because our system has to update everything so that it doesn't take a long time now with the internal system, but it does take a little while. We have to get the message out that, you know, something wasn't completed correctly or something wasn't submitted. And so then they'd have to go back out to you. And I really want everybody to enjoy, you know, the end of the year. So if you can get them in early, for myself, from my perspective, I would greatly appreciate that. That way we can get everything in the system. You don't have to think about it towards the end of the year. And we're trying to give you plenty of time so you can get all the information. So real quickly, just to summarize what I've talked about today is, you know, system changes. They're all mainly on the Federal Highway side, Federal Highway Administration, on the Office of Tribal Transportation. We're the ones that transferred all the information over from max.gov. We got, you know, a new system that's up and running, and we're still continuing to improve it to make it easier for the tribes. And from the tribes' perspective, like I said, you'll see very little change. One of the big things, I've been presenting in different places. I presented at the NTICC, and I'll actually be up in Alaska for providers again, presenting the same presentation. But one of the big things we heard, and that we're really happy that we were able to accommodate, is taking that 20-minute time frame that you had previously to put out, you know, complete your reports, to now making it a full day. So that should be plenty of time for you to get it in. Even if you get disrupted, you can come back, finish it up within that day, submit it, and you'll be done with it, and it's over. And like I said, the email links were already sent out. We would appreciate it if you could, you know, take the time here in the next month to get that information all together, get it submitted. That way we can have time to review it. And if anything is additional is needed, or if any questions or any information, we can get through those questions quickly with you. And then everybody can enjoy the end of the year. So this last slide, again, I just want to say thanks to Victoria and the Alaska TTAP for allowing me to present today. You have my email up here. I am the management and program analyst for OTT. We really look forward to working with everybody and getting this information. And one last thing that I didn't put on here is that we just put out, and I'll put it on the webinar chat, because we just released it today. So you may be getting it if you haven't got it already, because I know some of, especially our tribal coordinators, they're pretty prompt. But we just got it out to BIA. They're probably going through it before they'll send it to you probably sometime next week. But just in case, we also did some videos. And I don't think the links will go through, but you'll have the link name. If you just copy it and put it up on your URL, whatever web browser you're using, you should be able to. Oh, no, it does come through in Zoom. I was just curious. But you can click on these, and what it does, what these provide is OTT's own Blaine went through each of these reports one at a time. So whether you have a question on the financial, non-construction, or we're calling it project report now, it used to be called design report. Whether you have a question on what do I fill in here, whether you're new or you just don't understand the question, you can go to these videos and you can quickly assess what what are they asking for? What do they really mean? What do they want here in this question? Because he goes through every single one at a time. The other great thing is we created these because we're calling it micro learning. That's kind of we're taking that from academia, but they're short videos, right? They're like a little YouTube video where you can go in, figure out what you need to fill out. You don't have to sit through all three. If you just have a question on project report, you can go right into the project report. They're no more than 8. I think the longest one is 12 minutes. Shortest one is about 8 minutes. And so it's a really quick process that you can go into. And besides the link here that I'm providing today, we will also post this on our external website for annual reporting. So if you have the OTT external web page, you can click on the TTP annual reporting link. It'll open the page, and then once we vet these through our public affairs office, these links, the recordings will also be placed there. So if you didn't catch it or didn't catch the URL or whatever, here in the next week or so, you should be able to find those on our own OTT annual report website. And with that, I thank you guys so much. I appreciate your time. I don't want to take more time out of your meeting. But if we have, I don't know if we have time for questions. Vicky,
Yes, we definitely have time for questions. I mean, you actually had up to an hour and you've only used barely 20 minutes at this. You haven't even used 20 minutes. So we have a question that was.
Don't worry, Vicky, I'll use it.
Oh, you're going to use it, Miles? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, first, there's a question for David from Brian Winsteifer. FTA requires annual reports to be submitted the end of January. He's saying, what could we request our TTP reports be due at the end of January also to avoid the end of December holiday crunch time?
Now, yeah, I mean, well, I'll take that question up to our leadership, but my understanding it's been always requested at the end of December. But I'll take that question up to our leadership and see what they'll say, because it is a regulation that we have to get all this information before the end of December. And so we're actually talking about nothing current. We're talking about the fiscal year prior. So you should have that information already organized, at least to some level.
So the time, what is the time range that your reporting is covering, I mean?
So it's from, let's see, it would be October 1st, 2022 to September 30th, 2023.
All right. So are there any more questions for David? If not, then we'll move on to what Miles is presenting on this topic.
And I think David, let's see, okay, perfect.
Yep, Miles, I stopped sharing, so in case
Perfect.
you yep.
Thank you. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, David, for the intro on the reporting tool itself. I'm going to finish the session today, kind of walking through the questions and providing guidance on, best practices, things to consider as you work through your reports to meet the statutory deadline here. So again, I'm Miles Brookes. I'm a tribal coordinator here in the Alaska region, and currently my butt is sitting in a desk here in Wasilla, so I'm a couple miles away from you, Brian. And you'll see some background on your question here in the coming up slides. So, before I want to minimize this. I'm trying to. There we go. So before I begin, I just want to kind of give a couple key points here. The session provides examples and suggestions for completing your TTIP annual report. My goal here is to kind of get you thinking, kind of give you ideas on what documents, who to sit down with, and processes for getting the information you need to fill out the report that David had just given to you. Some of the questions in the report discussed in the section may not be applicable to tribes that deliver their transportation programs through non-FHWA program agreement methods, those 638s, BIA program agreements, etc. And then finally on these before we begin points, The projects, the programs, documents, et cetera, used as examples in this presentation, including the availability of such, may vary from your tribe. So I just want to make that known out there that, while this is guidance, this is assistance, and I'm trying to get you to think and spur discussion with your tribal staff and your departments and consultants. Some of these documents may not be available, and you may have to scramble to find the information you need to complete your report. So real quickly, questions here. Why do we do an annual report? Short and sweet. It's required by 25 CFR 170, section 240. And there's that 90-day language there, Brian, that kind of handcuffs at least us as bureaucrats on, having these due at the end of December during the holiday crunch. And then also if you're a PA, FHWA PA tribe, right there in Article 3, Section 7, Bravo, it will say, that language right there, the tribe should be responsible for inputting all of its required data no later than December 30th of each year. And that's language right from the program agreement for federal highway tribes. There's been some leniency with that, December 31st, December 30th. I think David mentioned December 31st, and I think that's kind of the unofficial deadline that we kind of hold true to while staying within the spirit of the regulation. Another question I get from time to time, I'm sure David is, and I've heard around there, is does my tribe have to use the online reporting tool? In short, yes. Coming back to the 25 CFR 170, 240, section Bravo, federal highways and BIA shall provide an electronic portal, right, to submit the data needed to fulfill the reporting requirements. And then if you are a federal highway program agreement tribe, again, Article 3, Section 7, Bravo notes that we've established an online data reporting system known as PORT. It's morphed a little bit because, since the program agreements have been signed, the names changed, but the intent still remains the same, that online reporting tool is the method for collecting that data. So what documents are kind of helpful before for completing the annual report? These are good documents to kind of either know where you have access to or know how to get access to them or have them on hand so you can really pull them together. Your previous year's TTP annual report is always helpful, especially if it's accurate. There's a lot of information there you can carry forward potentially or reference when you're completing the current year TTP annual report. All executed RFAs since signing with FHWA. These are all those agreements that transfer federal funds, not only TTP funds, but other federal funds that are allowed under the RFA to you as a tribe. Your current approved TTIP with the reporting year included. I know as a TC, and I think all of the federal highway TCs, when we sent out the links for the reporting tool, we also included a current copy of your most current approved TIP. So this is also a document, and you'll find later, is greatly valuable to have on hand when you sit down to start doing your annual report. Other documents which may vary from tribe to tribe, and you'll see here, tribal revenue reports, current years, historical reports, these, or access to at least querying this data is going to be very important for your reporting. Same thing with tribal payroll and expense reports for the reporting year, sometimes historical, but usually reporting years come in handy. If you have projects, construction reports, daily diaries, vouchers from design consultants, et cetera. So these kind of documents will help you pull together your construction or your project reports. And any others as needed. Coordinate with other tribal departments early for these needed documents, right? Well, understand that there's a tribal administration, there's tribal management, finance, there's the transportation director, there's accountants, there's consultants. So if you coordinate with these other departments early on these questions, gathering these documents hopefully become less painful. Also, another question is who may I need to coordinate with for the TTP reporting here, right? And these are just an example of who you may need to coordinate within your tribe. The tree is smaller if you're from a small tribe, the tree's bigger if you're from a large tribe, or if you're from a consortium, right? But some of these are the key players in holding some of this report data that you're going to need to help you fulfill a timely and accurate TTP report. So with that moving in, I'd like to kind of touch upon the three reports here. We'll go through each report by type. We have, there's a financial report, a non-construction report, and then a project report. The first two reports let me rewind here. I'll just dig into the financial report first and we'll move on in order. So the TTP financial report. The financial report is required from all tribes. And it includes basically the tribe's TTP financial data for the reporting period, which is that federal fiscal year that David mentioned, which is 10/1 through 9/30 every year. So this year it's 10/1/2022 through 9/30/2023. Financial report has a series of questions. We'll walk through them here. I'm not going to touch base on all the bullets here, but they're here for your reference if you have to come back and listen to this again. For all these kind of questions, I provide suggested documents for reference. I also suggested tribal staff maybe to consult to help you understand and to help you collect the data to answer these questions accurately. So the first question here, pretty simple. It's asking for the amount of federal transportation funds received during the reporting period. So the key thing here is federal transportation funds, whatever the flavor they are or the color they are, that were sent to your tribe during the reporting period through an RFA. So an RFA or a reference funding agreement should look familiar to quite a few of them. They look like this. This is what the tail end of it looks like. One area that's really helpful is if you have all your RFAs from last year in a pile and you're looking through them, look at the latest RFA, the latest executed RFA from fiscal year 23. And at the bottom of that, you'll see a cumulative or a total amount provided to date through FY23 RFAs. So if you look at that number, that's a real simple transpose of the data, pull that number, and that's the answer to your question here. So those funds transferred in that fiscal year through these reference funding agreements to the tribe. If you're worried you don't have your last RFA, your executed RFA, you can do some math here. You can also check with your tribe's finance department to check revenues from these type of documents and see if they match. But the easiest way to kind of identify this answer is through the latest RFA you have. And you can see here that this is the amendment number 2 for this tribe, and that was their latest RFA for the year. Question number 2. Ask the amount of federal transportation funds expended during the reported period. So again, you'll see these documents, these staff to consult. I'm not going to touch base on them every slide here, but they're there for kind of your reference to kind of get you to spur where you might have to go within your government to understand or to collect this data. So the key words here are federal transportation funds. Again, regardless of the flavor, whether they're TTP funds, ERFO funds, earmarks, that were expended during this reporting period, right? So these funds were spent from 10/1/22 through 9/30/2023, regardless of when the tribe received them through an RFA. It gets a little convoluted here, but there's an example expense report from a tribe here, right? And across the top here, you can see numerous years of federal highway funding for this tribe. You can see, grant revenues coming in and expenditures. And down here, if you kind of cross-tab everything, you see the total FHWA funds. You can see there was expenditures of 19 funds, expenditures of 20 funds, expenditures of 21 funds through this reporting period, but they were all aggregated to this number here to complete question number 2. So again, the key words here are all federal transportation funds that were received through a program agreement, regardless of when they were received and spent in the reporting year. Question 3, the amount of TTP funds expended during the reporting period. So again, some of the key words here that we want to pay attention to are the total amount of only TTP funds expended during the reporting period, that 10/1 to 9/30. Regardless of those TTP funds received through a transportation funding agreement, right, an RFA, if you would. So a key thing to note here is if your finance department knows that you don't spend anything but TTP funds, question 2 and question 3 are going to match. So as you can see here, you can see this example tribe, this report, you can see quite a few funding sources here, right, that were spent through this reporting period, the 10/1 through 9/30. You can see 21, 22, 23 funds, a 21 safety award, 23 planning were spent. But you can see other federal funding that was not spent. So really what you do is you need to really be able to extract the TTP funds that were expended and carry that amount over to question 3. Question 4 is your indirect costs during the reporting years, right? Key terms here, the amount of indirect costs collected from the federal transportation funds, right? Your TTP, your IRFO, that kind of stuff, and expended in the reporting period, right? And this will include the amounts in question 2 and 3 above. So you can see here from this example expense report that this tribe has, their indirect their costs for the reporting period. And then they just carried it over, ran a crosstab and reported such. Question 5, all federal transportation funds received, right? Since originally signing a reference funding agreement, right? So the key word here is every dollar that your tribe has received to date through an RFA since signing with federal highways, right? So some good documents here. If you have all of your old executed RFAs, it's a series of math, right? You can look at this RFA, kind of come up with a total and repeat as necessary. If your financial department has access to the data, they might be able to run that total for you. So there are a couple different ways you can kind of come up with the answer to question 5, if you would. Question 6, all federal transportation funds spent. So the key words here are federal transportation funds expended by the tribe since signing your first program agreement that were transferred through a funding agreement. So if you look at the red highlight here, this includes all the funds the tribe spent from those received from FHWA since signing their initial program agreement. So you can see here, this tribe has a transaction detail report, and they've run it since all the way from 2024. And you can see that it's their IRR account, also their TTP. And they went through by topic class, figured out all their expenses, right? For the last, looks like it'd be about 9 years, 10 years or whatever. Did the math and reported that amount for question 6. Again, these are examples. Your reports might be different. There might be a simpler way to do that, but this is just to kind of get you a spur, running these expense reports going back and tying them back to the federal highway funds that you received. Question number 7. Question number 7 should be fairly easy if the data in questions 5 and 6 of this report are accurate. And basically what this is the results of the federal transportation, all your RFA funds that are still available after all your expenditures. So thinking back to question 6, we just touched upon, if you take the $475,000 and change, and you subtract it from the $319,000, which is the cumulative funds, right? You'll get a difference of about $156,000. Again, the key here is if question 6 data and question 5 data are accurate, then doing this simple formula here will make question 7 accurate as well. Question 8, pretty simple yes or no question. Many of you will know this right off the top of your head based on maybe just your own TTP expenditures, but it's always good to check with your finance department or your tribal administrator to answer this question. And really what it comes down to is consult with the folks that know. And if the tribe spent more than $750,000 or more in federal funds, regardless of the program, whether it's transportation, housing, maybe you get a law enforcement grant. If you spend that threshold or more in that reporting period of federal funds, mark yes. And if you fall below that threshold, mark no. So remember, the key here is all federal funds spent by the tribe in the reporting period, which is the federal fiscal year, will determine the answer to this question. Moving on here, the COVID, the CARES money, it's still lingering out there. We're required, and the tribes are required to track these funds. Basically, and told we're no longer required to track this information. So again, if you remember, the HIP funds, the HIP CRISA funds were allocated in FY21 So this is where, if your previous annual TTP report was valid, you could look at your FY21 RFA, which is likely where those funds were transferred to the tribe. But again, these are all those funds received to date. There's been no funds in this category sent to the tribe since that FY21 period. So this data has probably remained consistent for the last couple annual reports for you. So again, if that data is accurate, you can just carry that number over from your annual report last year. Or if you want to have some sense of a level of assurance that accuracy, it may be worth reaching out to your finance department to see what that number really was and maybe cross-verify it against that FY21 RFA. So next series of questions really just talks about the amount of those funds that were expended during this period. A lot of tribes have spent their HIP CRISA, so these will start becoming just zeros for the most part. You can see here this tribe in this reporting period had 0 expenditures in the HIP CRISA funds, so it's a 0. Again, that was the total cumulative amount, right, of any HIP CRISA funds, any activity. Then we ask for a breakdown of the type of activity. They talk about administration in question 11. You can see again 0 from that same revenue. They talk about maintenance, whether it was routine or preventative. Again, you see in this expense report, it's 0. And then finally, they ask for other categories of HIP CRISA funds that were expended during the reporting period. So again, with this tribe, it's 0 because they have their expenses here. But again, it's an example. Your tribe may actually have expenditures of HIP CRISA funds as they decided what they want to do with them. So, a good key here is to really work with your finance office on, seeing where those funds expend. And if your reports were accurate from the last years, you may also notice that all your funds were spent in 21, 22. So maybe those numbers, you can just verify all the funds were spent and carry zeros forward. 14 and 15, real simple, just to give you an idea of the process here, what it looks like. Enter your BIA6 code, enter your tribe name, click submit when the fields are done. You should receive a confirmation that looks like this, right? A thank you, quick note. All the fields David mentioned have to have some sort of data in them, whether it's a numerical value or a text value. So if any of those questions don't apply, or if they truly are zeros, please enter zeros in there, or you won't get this magical response here saying you've completed your financial report. Moving on to the second of 3 reports that are part of the annual report is the non-construction activity report. And you might hear some old seasoned TCs or POCs or others refer to them as the STAMP report. And what that means is the STAMP is the safety, your transit, your administration, your planning, or your maintenance, or your planning activities report, right? So those are these activities that don't really lead to construction. They just they're the activities that kind of keep your program going day to day, or operations, if you would. So a couple things on this report. This report is required from all tribes. And then, like I said, it includes the tribe's TTP non-construction activities and finance data for that same reporting period, that 10/1/22 through 9/30/23 for this year's annual report period. So questions 1 and 2 talk about TTP non-construction activities, right? Questions here are being asked about jobs retained and jobs created. So this one's a little difficult. I'm not sure where to really pull some of this data. So, I would suggest talking with your tribal HR or staffing people, maybe your payroll persons. You can also refer back to your previous year's annual TT report. If you know that, the same amount of people are working for transportation that are still working for transportation, or if you didn't create any jobs this year, you can zero that number out. So you had a big construction project last year that were like short-term projects, temporary construction labor, but they've gone away. You know how to kind of maybe answer those questions. So again, just asking about the number of permanent positions funded by TTP during the fiscal year. And then question 2 is number of short-term positions used to carry out your projects, right? These are your kind of jobs created, right, in response to projects that are being delivered by your tribe. So moving through these next series of questions, you're going to see a common recurring theme here. Eventually, you're going to get tired of seeing a certain document, and you'll know it when you see it, and I'll let you know here. But again, your current approved tip is really going to be handy for this report as well as your construction activity report. So question 3 asks about the administrative expenses of the TTP. And specifically, it's asking for the funds programmed for your administrative activities. Your current TTIP is the place to go for this because, one, the question says enter the amount shown on your tip, right? So if you have your current tip on hand, it's as simple as coming over to your administration project name and cross-tabbing it for the reporting year 2023 with the activity administration 50,000 and carrying it over to answer the question. Question 4 and 5, right? Question 3 talks about what did you plan to do, right? We plan to spend $50,000 on administration. Question 4 and 5 says, well, what occurred on the administration activities? So, the first question is, how much TTP funds did you expend on your administrative program for the year? So you can see here, this tribe pulled up an example, expense report. They've got all their activities. Regardless of the fund source, they expended a little over $66,000 on administrative activities for the reporting cycle. Transpose that number into this field here. Question 5, basically write a brief description of what administrative tasks were completed during the fiscal year, right? This is what we did TTP administration this year. Pretty simple, pretty short. The more broad, the better for these kind of responses. Cycle's going to repeat again. Planning activities, right? Get your current approved tip on hand. Find your planning program in your tip, right? You can see that the type of work is planning. The project name is planning. And, your funding source is even planning. These are all good keys to kind of go, this is truly a planning project. Find your 2023, cross tab your year with your activity, and carry that amount over to your question. And again, questions 7 and 8, the follow-up questions, report on what was actually accomplished out of what was planned in your tip, right? So we talk about, okay, here's an example of that revenue report again. You can see that they have a project called 2023 TTP planning, and that in the reporting cycle, they're expended just over 17,000. And again, the tribe completed the following planning activities, really brief. Maybe you updated your tip, maybe your LRTP, maybe you went out and did some inventory work. Those kind of planning activities is where you would kind of recap there. Click next on this button. I'm going to speed up because the common theme here, right? Hopefully we see the thing here, right? Question 9 for safety. One key thing with safety and transit activities is if you have a safety project that leads to construction. So say you have a safety project that is going to put in stop signs and traffic lights in your community, that is not where you would report those activities. The activities that are included under safety activities are things that don't lead to construction. So maybe that's your safety plans. Maybe it's a road safety audit. Maybe it's developing a new crash data reporting software for your tribal police force or VPSOs. That's where these activities would be captured, right? So again, find your tip, find what you were looking to do. Here's your safety fund. Here's safety plan development, and then find the amount and transpose it here. One thing is you may have more than one of these pages for non-construction safety activities. So make sure you check your current tip. And if you do have questions about that, please reach out to your point of contact to make sure that data is as accurate as possible. Again, question 10 and 11, just follow up with, hey, what did you spend on those safety activities? And then what was the progress of those safety activities? Again, brief description on what safety tasks were completed during the fiscal year. Click your next button. Maintenance activities, same process again, right? Find it in your tip, reporting your activity, bring it over, report the amount you spent, right? Recap what was done maintenance wise here in the field for question 14, and then move on. So there's this one thing here, caught it. We know this is question 15 looks really weird. Question 15 just says transit activities. Enter your answer. So this is I think it was supposed to be a section break, and you know, I think David can correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll move on though. But it's kind of a thing that was supposed to be a section break. So this is a bug. So for this question 15, I'd recommend just filling in NA or none response in number 15, even if you had transit activities to report on, and then move on to question 16 to actually start reporting on those transit activities, similar to how we just did them for safety planning and administration. So again, that common theme, right? You probably should be tired of seeing these tip pages here, right? You know, find your transit activities. If you have them programmed, carry that field. Again, I'm going to go back here 1 second. Don't include costs associated with a transit construction project. So if you had a project to install bus pullouts and bus shelters along your route, those are construction projects, and those will be reported on the construction reports, which we'll cover in a little bit, and not here. These are your transit activities, which don't lead to construction. So as questions 17 and 18 kind of allude to here, you'll see, right, you can see here, there was payroll, right? So probably for your bus drivers, fuel vendors, right? So the cost to keep your buses running and some equipment purchases. So those transit activities that are non-construction in nature fuel the responses for questions 16, 17, and 18. And again, find those numbers, work with your finance staff, pull them in, report here on your transit activities. You can see this tribe actually has a transit program and an account code, and they build that. And again, brief description of your transit activities for the fiscal year. And again, once you get to 19 and 20, simple stuff here, your BIA 6 code, your tribe name, hit your submit button. And again, you'll see a confirmation that looks like this if all your fields have been completed within the previous report. So those two reports, your finance report and your non-construction activity report, we're going to get one of those from every tribe. That's part of the requirement. The next series of reports, what we call projects or construction projects, is required from all tribes with a project basically programmed in their tip with the following activities: preliminary engineering, construction engineering. So these are your quote unquote projects, right? You're moving earth, you're building structures, you're doing something here that's leading to some sort of betterment or some tangible asset that the tribe will have to manage or maintain in the future. And also this project report, and this is very important, is required for each programmed project program in a tribe's tip. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take one project from an example tip and walk you through all these questions for that project. If your tribe has another project, right, and you'll see this later on, you'll do this whole cycle again for that project. And if they have a third project, you'll do that cycle again for that whole project until you run out of any project in your tip that has one of these, what we call the big three: preliminary engineering, construction, or construction engineering. So again, if you have a project in your tip with any of these activities programmed, you're going to come to this tool here and report on it for that fiscal year. So again, your tip is going to help you through probably a good 75% of these questions here. A lot of these questions used to be pre-populated under the old system, but due to the capacity we have, the timing, and the release date, hopefully we get there someday. But for the time being, there's going to have to be a little manual legwork to report on these. So real simple, if you have your project page here, this should look familiar already. This project that we'll be doing, that we'll kind of work through, is called the Landfill Road and Airport Road Intersection Improvements. First question asks for the federal agency project number. A lot of tips should have this little gray number here on your approved tip. That's your federal project number. If you don't have it, if there's not one there, for whatever reason you can't find it, hit none or enter none in this field and move on. Your tribes project number, usually that'll be in your tip, right here. There's no requirement for tribes to use project numbers. So if your tribe doesn't use one, hit no. If your finance department, whatever project number you can use to tie back to your records to this report, that's the number I would recommend using here. Many times it is the tip number that is included because the tribes are filling out this tip for submittal. And pretty simple, transpose or copy and paste. Honestly, the best way to do this is to find your tip title and transpose it for the answer for question number 3. Question 4. Again, we come back to this, our tip page, right? We have the landfill load project. Sorry, touchy here. Project description, my recommendation or assistance, or what is pretty much good enough, is pulling the project scope of work or the project description right from your tip, copying and pasting it right here is what I find sufficient information for the project description. Your funding sources, right, are also usually included or required to be fiscally constrained in your tipper here. So you can see TTP funds, Tiger funds, Denali Commission funds, and sometimes you'll find those broken out here, right? So you see some money from Tiger grants, Denali, and then TTP funds for a portion of the project. Question 6, still hanging on to this tip page here for this information. You have your NTT5 root number, right? If you have more than one number or more than one section, include those here. A project location, very generalized here. It can be a milepost of a road if you have those. It could be the intersection. It could be the whole road, right? If it's airport road from the whole length, maybe put that in there, but just some sort of identifying location so the report data can kind of be tied back to that physical construction at some point. Pretty easy fields here. Your county, your borough that we all know them to be, or your census area, whatever data is in here, copy and paste that over. It's going to require a response. So I would, usually, what borough, if you're in a borough, or what census area, put that data in here. Project location state, pretty simple. Project length, again, come back to the tip here, right? You can see this project length was 0.2 miles. Some guidance here, if you're building a vertical structure, which you don't measure in miles, or if you're doing a parking lot, just default to the 0.01, right? As noted here for discrete facilities or site-specific projects, enter the 0.1 number here. All other cases, use this length here, and usually those discrete locations will be noted as 0.1. So it's pretty safe to use the length in your approved tip to answer this question. So the last half of the questions here, you're going to have to do some legwork here. You're going to have to do some math. You're going to have to kind of take an assessment of your project. Question 11 here is your project status narrative. Some good documents for these reference are construction records, daily diaries from your contractors, paid work invoices, right? Invoices you've paid to your contractors, your consultants, other staff to consult, your transportation director, finance, and your consultants and contractors. So for this example document here, there's a narrative, right? So, this is a construction report ending at the final part of the fiscal year. And the contractor saying, hey, we've completed the pay item for clearing and grubbing. We've started some of the pay item for common excavation and subbase. So, that put it in here, right? And through talking with consultants, this transportation person was able to determine, hey, we awarded, the PS&E was completed this year, so we awarded out to contract. No changes. So this really is a short, 3 to 4 sentence story of where your project is to date. And the data or the information from this can be pulled from a lot of sources that I had mentioned. Construction reports, invoices, etc. Project activity reports, again, look at your records, invoices, talk to your tribal staff and the other departments, and ask those questions that are here. What did we do? What did we pay for? And those answers will really cross you over to what was done. So, you know, in the previous example, we know PS&E was finalized and that the project went out to bid for construction. So we know PS&E and construction occurred during that reporting period. Project funding, we talk about the TTP funds that were expended in that fiscal year. So, you know, this tribe here in the example has a project name, project account. They ran their numbers, and they extracted what they believe are the TTP costs for the PE, the construction, and the CE, regardless of when those funds were received through the RFA. So you can see here some 21 TTP funds were spent on this project. Some 22 funds were expended on this project. Some 23 funds were expended on these projects that were TTP funds. You can see other funds that are not TTP funds that aren't included in this data fields, right? So we can see here a little over almost $42,000 in TTP funds were expended on this project for this fiscal reporting year or fiscal year / reporting period. Question 14, cast the net bigger. It's asking you all the funds, right? It's asking all those funds that were expended during the fiscal year. So you'll come back, you'll see this reporting, the same report again, and you can see here, you know, there's a project number that's all the same, the title of the project, and it's in that reporting period, right? So you can see the TTP funds, you can see the Denali Award, some Raise Grant or Tiger Grant stuff here. And you can see, you know, the tribes do their report query that they expended, you know, $318,000 or so on the project for that reporting period. And that answer would be sufficient for question 14. And we're getting there, guys. Hang with me. A couple more minutes, a couple more slides, and we're getting close. Question 15 on this report is your anticipated total project cost. This one is definitely, I think, one of the bigger puzzles, if you would, in coming up with this number, if you want it to be truly accurate. So a couple of key things here include all the funding sources and years for your project, right? And then the amount should include all project costs, right? So not only all funding sources and all years, but all project costs, your preliminary engineering, your construction costs, and your CE here will reflect the current estimates. So there is a lot of documents you may have to reference. You may have to look at your paid invoices. You might have to look at your current tip to look at estimates if you're not in construction yet. You might need to look at construction records to see where you're at. So this really is going to be a team effort to gather all this data. So again, here's a similar report. You can see though, the dates have changed on this, right? You can see that this is a 3-year period that the tribe's reporting on. You can see some different activities. You know, we have construction engineering, we have design services and construction services. So we know PE or the design is done on the project. So this tribe calculated all their design service costs, right? And then the tribe went over to a construction report and they say, okay, we have an original contract amount, right? The construction's ongoing, but we do know our contract amount at the moment is $989,000. So they carried that amount over. And then they went to their tip and they know, okay, we have $100,000 estimated for CE or construction engineering. So you can see here, there's 3 different documents that were pulled together to kind of come up with an estimate or anticipated total project cost, where you can see this estimated or this anticipated cost is 1.2 million. I want to really relay this to you and ease any concerns. This is just an estimate. This does nothing to your funding. This doesn't behold you to get that project done in that certain amount. It does nothing more than give us an estimate on how accurate planned funds are versus changing project costs are. So again, this number, we really like it to be as accurate as possible, but there's no ramifications if it is or isn't positive or negative on those outcomes. 16 and 17, just kind of give an update of where we are on the project. Again, similar construction report, you know, the contractor estimates, you know, 30% of the work's been completed. They have a probable completion date of September 1st of next year. So those dates are a good place to kind of see, answer these questions. You may have other source documents that can help you answer these fields. And finally, we're at the end here of the construction report. We're talking about your BIA 6 code, your example tried, hit submit, and you should receive a similar confirmation from the previous two reports that you did as a tribe. So one thing I mentioned this, I mentioned this previously before we started this section report, but again, repeat this process, slides 37 through 48 for every active project programmed in your TTIP with one or more of the following activities. Your preliminary engineering, you can see that this is a clinic access road with PE, or construction engineering. And you can see this is a culvert reconstruction project that has items of construction or construction engineering included in their tip. So you'll take these projects and, the first one, the clinic road, you'll submit a number of response, go through all those steps, hit submit, and then that culvert reconstruction process, you'll go through all those steps again and hit submit until you run out of projects in your tip with these big 3 items programmed. So with that, that's pretty much all I have. I wanted to provide with a couple of final thoughts, questions, and comments. Again, your TTP reports by statute or regulation are due December 30th. December 31st is probably accurate if you want some slack time. And then obviously, I'm not going to go on record, but again, with the holiday on the 1st, probably a little bit more slack time. Coordination with your tribal departments and staff is likely. Begin your report and your data gathering as early as possible. We're already about 30 days into the window with 60 days left. So you can see how getting all these documents together and all the people you have to coordinate can actually eat a chunk of time to actually fill out the 15 minutes it takes to do the reports. Work with your TCs or your POCs. If further assistance is needed on the report itself or the reporting tool, we'll resolve those questions with David if it's a reporting tool issue or question, or if it's, filling out the data portion accurately, we can work with you. And then finally, if you need to make any corrections to a submitted report, contact your TC, that should say or and not of, or your PC to discuss the best course of action to make the change. If you answered one question wrong and that was it in the whole report, it may be as simple as an email back and forth, and we can update that data for you in the back end rather than having to go through that whole report again. But if you answered a whole report wrong, 10 of the 15 questions are not valid, it may just be easier for you to go in and make those corrections on your own and resubmit a report. So again, if you do find out you made an error, reach out to your TC or POC, discuss the best course of those actions. So I know that's a lot. I've been speaking for almost 45 minutes. We're a couple minutes over, but I'm going to open it up if there's any questions or comments, and I'm going to take a breath.
All right. Do we have any questions for Miles? He's given everyone a lot of information there. The recording of this will be posted if you need to go back over anything or want to check it, but it'll be available on the AIDC YouTube channel. With that, I'm going to stop recording.